So guys, the fourth thing you should always be working on drums, which as long as you're working on it, you can be looser and just mess around in the shed, is flashback. Let's talk about why this matters. This is Nate Wood. A few years ago, Nate was nice enough to come over to my studio for a quick shed and an interview. Just a few steps away from where I'm standing, actually. And he said this.
I'm curious for you, when you do practice drums, are you practicing things that are geared toward making that uplink work better, or do you just do sort of simple mechanical things, or none of the above?
I do a combination, but for sure improvising, you know? Just working through that pathway like I was talking about earlier, and following your own narrative and not getting hung up. If something hangs me up, it's like, what was that? Work through it.
Oh, interesting.
You know?
You know what's hot right now in the drums? Practice routines. Bro, I spend 3 hours a day. The first hour is stick control. The second hour is Jim Chapin. And the third hour is, the 26 essential rudiments. And that's great. At certain periods in my life, I've done the lock myself in the practice room for 3 hours a day thing. And one thing's for sure, you can't not get better doing that. But the problem is, you'll be making super quick progress for the first few months of a routine like that. Then it'll start to fall off. You'll start to notice stuff you're practicing isn't really translating into your playing. And you're spending a lot of time every day. That's a huge time commitment. And you might start to get bored. And for those situations, I have a controversial solution. Mess around.
Mess around. They're doing the mess around.
What? Are you crazy? Is this finger paint school? Are you trying to be a serious drummer or not?
The chaos is hiding in what's irrelevant.
Relax. In this video, I'm going to show you why getting rid of your practice structure is sometimes essential to making progress, and how to do it the right way so you can break out of your ruts without wasting time. We're going to talk about something I call the 4 C's, and how, as long as you're always working on one of them, you can rest easy in the knowledge that you're making progress. What if you could mess around and drop most of the structure from your practice routine and still get better faster? Stay tuned. First, and I promise this will be brief, let's talk about where unstructured practice goes wrong. Because if you're at all like me, you might be afraid to leave that 3-hour structured routine and try something new. What if I just spend all my time noodling?
Oh my God, this is so satisfying.
And never get any better. I used to just mess around, and it was only after I got serious that my playing started to improve. Look, I get it. When I was in high school, I made the decision to get serious. I started practicing 2 to 3 hours a day, getting a super organized split, like a workout routine, and starting every day with hard/boring stuff, like rudiments on the practice pad. If you'd asked me then why I wouldn't just go into the shed and mess around, I'd say that's what I used to do, and I wasn't getting any better. Well, yes and no. Anyway, let's look at the reasons messing around goes wrong. The first is, if you're not clear what your goals are, you're always tempted to work on what you already know. As an example, when I was younger, I used to just mess around with jazz. I'd play along with Jack DeJohnette, but never practiced any coordination. So I'd just end up repeating the same patterns over and over again, without realizing it. To get better, we have to practice our weaknesses. So that's one argument in favor of structure, to force us to work on the hard stuff, because it's there on the sheet. Now let's talk about how not to let that happen. Feedback loops. Last year, I made a video about whistling along to jazz solos. So lately, I've been whistling on camera. A lot. The experience taught me something important. If you have a discrete task to do and a clear picture of how the level at which you're performing the task relates to the desired result, you can't help but get better. I was trying to memorize some really complex melodies from great jazz musicians. The method that succeeded? Just making small enough loops of the solo and whistling each one like 100 times. First, I'd copy the whole solo into GarageBand. Then I'd make a loop of the first part of the solo I hadn't learned yet. When I'd practiced that loop enough to learn it, I moved on. Each time I began a new loop, I whistled the entirety of the solo up to that point, relying on the recency of the new loop to keep it ingrained, and the repetition of the material leading up to that to keep it from dropping out. Got it? I couldn't not get better. A lot of accelerated learning theory rests on this idea. We'll come back to feed loops later on, but for now, let's talk about the 4 C's. You walk into the practice room. You sit down and you start to just play. How are you not wasting time? By making sure you're always doing one of these 4 things. Number 1, coordination. Coordination is something we're all familiar with. It's a super popular topic in drum books. But let me be clear, even if you're messing around, as long as you're working on coordination, you're not wasting time. This doesn't necessarily mean plotting your way through New Breed, or inventing needlessly complex exercises just to challenge yourself, unless that's what you're into. What it does mean is as you improvise, if you've got a coordination focus, you're never going to let yourself get away with coordination sloppiness. Here are some examples of coordination challenges. Different combos between the right foot and the hands, with the left foot keeping quarters or eighths. Override or polymeters and swing. Why it's important. Ultimately, the drums are about centralizing a percussion section to one person. So coordination's pretty important. Many of the standard roles you'll be asked to play will be easier if you have some coordination. And it's not just esoteric jazz or fusion. A lot of pretty basic styles require coordination. Here are just a couple coordination challenges I used to face on cover gigs when I was coming up. Late in the Evening by Paul Simon. Lowrider. Good Times, Bad Times. How to practice it. To practice coordination during a messing around session, I'd often just improvise until I arrive at a coordination challenge. Then I'd isolate the thing that was giving me difficulty. And only add in one thing at a time until everything felt secure. Here's an example of one coordination thing that was challenging me last year. I actually made a video about it. Certain combos with the right foot and other limbs, while I was maintaining quarters or eighths in the left foot. By isolating just a short loop of a simple thing, I'm giving feedback loops time to work. Once something feels secure, I'll move on to the next thing or play it in a broader context. This allows me to mess around and go wherever my whims take me, but not waste the opportunity to work on coordination. Okay, now let's look at the second C. Number 2, cleanliness. This is creating a feedback loop when it comes to anything you sound sloppy doing, whether or not it's because you're doing multiple things at the same time. With coordination, I was sloppy because one limb was doing one thing and the other limbs were doing different things, which felt awkward to my body. But there are simpler forms of cleanliness. Like one thing I've been working on recently, just playing linear eighths, triplets, and sixteenths, and making sure that every sound is clean and every note even. There are combos with singles and kicks or hats, which can be challenging when changing surfaces. Then there are combos that incorporate other rudiments, like paradiddles, doubles, six-stroke rolls, etc. Why is this important? We want to be able to control our sound. We don't want to be unintentionally messy, like having a left hand that's always louder than the right when we're playing doubles. As Master Mark says, it's easier to be able to play controlled and choose to play messy than the other way around. Okay, so how do we mess around with cleanliness and still keep feedback loops? Same way as with coordination. Just start by improvising until we arrive at a cleanliness problem. Like doubles on the snare that drag, and then singles on the floor tom that rush. Create that feedback loop. Make it as short as you need to, and just repeat until your brain does the natural thing. Then broaden and/or move on to the next. Eventually, you'll find fewer and fewer instances where your coordination or cleanliness interrupts your improvisation. But you can't always tell how good you sound in real time. Which brings us to the third C of messing around in the shed. Challenge. Number 3, challenge. Occasionally, we're going to want to distrust what our ears and senses are telling us in the moment. That's when we're going to deploy the trick that's probably the biggest check on wasting time while messing around. Recording ourselves. Let's talk more about feedback loops. We can have super small feedback loops with a practice session, like playing those offbeats against the hi-hats. Determining whether or not that's working in the moment is pretty straightforward. Does it feel settled and like it's flowing? If so, move on. But we could be playing the whole phrase at a time, even if it sounds good to us. As I discovered when I started trying to do drum covers in 2010, 2011, we can be pretty bad at hearing ourselves the way we really sound in the moment, especially if we don't practice it. I've told this story about how there were gigs when I'd get off stage and thought I killed it, then wondered why everybody was looking at the floor. Until I listened to the recording. So listening to recordings of yourself is a bigger feedback loop. You learn your tendencies, like to rush off beats, or to broaden and rush consecutive kick drum notes. And just like the smaller feedback loops, a lot of learning happens subconsciously if you listen to recordings of yourself a lot. The goal is to get to a point where nothing you hear on the recording surprises you. If it feels good in the moment, you can trust that it sounds that way to the audience. How to do it? I've been over this in plenty of videos, but the easiest is just pull out the smartphone and start recording yourself improvising. Especially if you've had a great day in the shed and you're feeling confident. That's a good time to record yourself. One level up from that is recording yourself playing along with recordings, drum cover style. Great start. Here, you're seeing how well you lock up with the music. And if your playing takes a dip when you have to focus on two things, the band and yourself, instead of just one. Finally, there's recording your rehearsals and gigs, which will give you feedback about how you sound playing with other musicians who are responding to you. Was there something you did that felt good and which maybe even sounds good on its own, but which caused the band to fall apart? Maybe don't do that anymore, etc. Before we get to number 4, a quick word about feedback loops. They're powerful, Anders Ericsson is famous for the so-called 10,000 hour rule, but it might be better called the 10,000 rep rule. When people have been able to hack learning and speed up the process of becoming an expert at something, it's often because they figured out the component parts of the skill set and figured out how to get more reps in less time. Example, the Brazilian football, that's soccer for you Americans, players in the talent code who play a similar game with a smaller ball, forcing themselves to get critical reps in ball handling that will translate better when the soccer ball is larger. Example, Josh Waitzkin figuring out a component part of foil surfing that you usually only get 10 to 15 reps of in an afternoon, and figuring out how to get 500 in a day using an e-foil. And this is exactly why practice can be so high leverage and save you tons of time in the shed. Say you spend 45 minutes messing around in the shed, but in that time you work on 3 coordination things for 50 reps each, and 3 cleanliness things for, say, 40 reps each. That's, I don't know why I made the numbers different. 270 reps, but you could spend 3 hours in the practice room and get far fewer reps than that, especially if you're working on the same 3 to 5 things every time. Okay, on to the last C. The thing that as long as you're doing it, you're making progress, even if you're messing around. Number 4, creativity. This is the opposite of challenge. As I discussed in a video 2 weeks ago, this is about learning to let go and shut out the critical voice, and just play by instinct and have fun. Think Elvin Jones, Dave King, Moon Hooch, Why is this important? Because real music making requires dropping your self-consciousness. If you're always in debug mode when you're playing, your music is going to suffer. Fortunately, we can create feedback loops even when it comes to creativity. We just create them around not letting that critical voice intervene. How do we test this? 2 of my favorite ways are these. First, there's the no critical voice exercise from the How to Get Out of Your Head video. Play for as long as you can without self-criticism. Start playing something you're really comfortable with. No metronome, not even a beat necessarily. I'm just going to play simply. You're going to play and take note of when any of these thoughts comes into your head. I just made a mistake. That didn't sound good. I should be thinking of better ideas. I wonder what XYZ person would think of this. Whenever a thought like that enters your head, you're going to stop, acknowledge you caught yourself self-editing, and start again. Next, there's the change the context drill from my What to Do When You Hate Your Playing video. Here are 5 things I've been known to do. Switch metronome placements from, say, every 4th 16th to dotted quarters or eighths. Speed it up or slow it down. Change the time signature. Things that sound stale in 4 often sound fresh in 5 or 7. Put the hi-hats on the dotted quarter or eighth, or on another ostinato. That one's a little advanced. And that's how you mess around in the practice room and still get better faster. So dudes, hope you enjoyed this one, and if you've been checking out the channel for a hot minute, if you feel like you might be ready to go a little bit deeper with all this practice stuff, I recommend my course, the 80/20 Coaching Course, which we only open up a few times a year, but it's like 6 to 9 months of studying with me for around the price of a single lesson. And if you'd like to get on the waitlist for that and get a completely free gateway drug, I recommend you click the link below the player, enter your email address in on the next page, and I'll send you 3 free videos I don't share on YouTube, which I assert will make your playing better in the next 3 weeks than it's gotten in the last 6 months. Dudes, it's been real. Always enjoy this. See you next time. We'll see what happens with the outtakes. Das drum speaking.
Keep it all.
Das Vlogging speeching.
Don't keep that.
Secure, bro. We do Russian accent to death, but I'm not tired of it yet.
Keep it all.
It does research. Yeah, fuck it. We'll do them.